Hello people, this is Pahal Verma, and in today's chapter we are going to learn about international organizations. So, the overview of this chapter says that we will study the role of the international organizations after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reconstructing of international organizations. We will also read about the reforms of the United Nations Security Council and the reform process and its difficulties. We will also learn about India's involvement in the UN and the Security Council reforms. UN can play any role in dealing with the world dominated with one superpower. We'll look at the role played by UN after the dominance of USA. And we'll also look at some other transnational organizations that are playing a crucial role in world politics. Now, why international organizations? This is an introduction of international organizations. Both the cartoons comment on the ineffectiveness of the United Nations organization, usually referred to as UN, in Lebanon crisis in 2006. As you can see, these are two cartoons which reflect the ineffectiveness of UN. On the other hand, we also find that UN is generally regarded as the most important international organization in today's world. UN represents the great hope of humanity for peace and progress. Now, this is what UN is. Here are two views by two people, very pronounced people. The United Nations was not created to take humanity to heaven, but to save it from hell. This is said by Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN Second Secretary General. Now, these are talking shop. Yes, there is a lot of speeches and meetings at UN, especially during the annual sessions of the General Assembly. But as Churchill put in, jaw is better than war. Now, this is said by Shashi Tharoor, the former UN Under Secretary General for Communication and Public Information. Shashi Tharoor is an Indian and who is a Congress Cabinet Minister from Tamil Nadu. Now, what is international organizations? International organizations are not the answer to everything, but they are important. International organizations help with matters of war and peace. They also help countries cooperate to make better living conditions for all of us. Now, this is what is international organizations. Let's move on to the definition of international organizations. They can instead discuss contentious issues and find peaceful solutions to problems. The role of an international organization can be important in this context. Now, how are international organizations formed and what is the role of international organization? An international organization is not a super state with authority over its members. It is created by and responds to states. It comes into being when states agree to its creation. Once created, it can help member states resolve their problems peacefully. International organizations are helpful in another way. Nations can usually see that there are some things they must do together. Now, there are some common issues which all the countries should cooperate in, such as disease is an example. Some diseases can only be eradicated if everyone in the world cooperates in inculcating or vaccinating their populations, such as the disease of coronavirus. Other take global warming and its effects. As atmosphere temperatures rise because of the spread of certain chemicals, there is a danger that sea levels will also rise, thereby submerging many coastal areas of the world. Of course, each country can try to find its own solution, but in the end, a more effective approach is to stop the warming itself. This requires at least all of the major industrial powers to cooperate. Unfortunately, recognizing the need for cooperation and actually cooperating are two different things. Now, what is the role of international organization? An international organization can help produce information and ideas about how to cooperate. It can provide mechanism, rules and a bureaucracy to help members have more confidence that costs will be shared properly, that the benefits will be fairly divided, and that once a member joins an agreement, it will honor the terms and conditions of the agreement. Now, Western countries led by the US would be so powerful that there would be no check against their wishes and desires. With the end of the Cold War, we can see that the UN may have a slightly different role. As the United States and its allies emerged victorious, there was concern amongst many governments and people. Now, this is very true that after the Cold War, after the end of the Cold War, United States and its allies were victorious in the Second World War. So, everyone feared that UN would slightly bend towards the United Nations and its allies. Now, we'll study evolution of the UN. How did UN came into being? The First World War encouraged the world to invest in an international organization to deal with conflict. Many believed that such an organization would help the world to avoid war. As a result, the League of Nations was born. Now, however, despite its initial success, it could not prevent the Second World War. Many more people died and were wounded in this war than ever before. The UN was founded as a successor of the League of Nations. It was established in 1945, immediately after the Second World War. This is a poster of United Nations. Now, United Nations Charter was signed by 51 states. The UN's objective is to prevent international conflict and to facilitate cooperation among states. This is the objective of UN. It would act to stop the conflicts between states escalating into war, and if war broke out, to limit the extent of hostilities. This is the objective. Another objective is to bring countries together to improve the prospects of social and economic development all over the world. By 2006, the UN had 192 member states. This is the evolution of UN. Now, it includes almost all independent states. In the UN General Assembly, all members have one vote each. In this UN Security Council, there are 5 permanent members. These are United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France and China. Now, these states were selected as permanent members as they were the most powerful immediately after the Second World War and because they constituted the victors in the war. The UN's most visible public figure that the representative head is called the Secretary General. Ban Ki-moon from South Korea, he is the 8th Secretary General of the UN. He took over as Secretary General on 1st January 2007. He is the first Asian to hold his post since 1971. Now, this is a data which you don't need to remember. UN constitutes many different structures and agencies. These are General Assembly as well as the Security Council. Now, for social and economic issues, they have World Health Organization. Another organization is UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, United Nations Human Rights Commission, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHRC, United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. These are some organizations of UN. Now, reform of the UN after the Cold War. What reforms were required and what reforms came into the UN? Reform and improvement. are fundamental to any organization to serve the needs of a changing environment. Now, demands of reforms of the world body. Two basic kinds of reforms face the UN. Reform of the organization structures and processes, a review of the issues that fall within the jurisdiction of the organization. The first kind of reform was reform of the organization structure and processes. What came under this was a review of issues that fall within the jurisdiction of the UN. These were the two basic kind of reforms. Now the first reform was on the reform of structures and processes. The biggest discussion has been on the functioning of the Security Council. The biggest discussion was on the functioning of Security Council. Increase in the UN Security Council's permanent and non-permanent membership so that the realities of contemporary world politics are better reflected in the structure of the organization. To increase membership from Asia, Africa and South America. Beyond this, US and other Western countries want improvements in the UN's budgetary procedures and its administration. This is the first reform. Second reform is jurisdiction of the US. Some countries and experts want the organization to play a greater or more effective role in peace and security missions, while others want its role to be confined to development and humanitarian work such as health, education, environment, population control, human rights, gender and social justice. These are the two reforms. Now some of the changes that have occurred are: the Soviet Union has collapsed, as we all know. The US is the strongest power. The relationship between Russia, the successor of Soviet Union, and US is much more cooperative. China is fast emerging as a great power, and India also is growing rapidly. The economies of Asia are growing at an unprecedented rate. Many new countries have joined the UN as they become independent from Soviet Union or former communist states in Eastern Europe. A whole new set of challenges confront the world: genocide, civil war, ethnic conflict, terrorism, nuclear proliferation, climate change, environmental degradation and epidemics. These are the changes that have occurred after the Second World War, that is after the Cold War. Reform of structures and processes. The resolution reflected three main complaints. While the case of reform has widespread support, getting agreement on what to do is difficult. Now this is the resolution which has main complaints. The Security Council no longer represents contemporary political realities. This is one complaint. Second complaint is its decisions reflect only Western values and interests and are dominated by a few powers. This is also true. It lacks equitable representation. Now, on January 1st, 1997, the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan initiated an inquiry into how the UN should be reformed. The following are some of the criteria that have been proposed for new permanent and non-permanent members of the Security Council. This is very important. Please learn these 6 lines. I learned these when I was writing my papers. And the criteria for new permanent and non-permanent members is that the country should be a major economic power, a major military power, a substantial contributor to the UN budget, a big nation in terms of its population, a nation that respects democracy and human rights, a country that would make the council more representative of the world's diversity in terms of geography, economic systems and culture. Now these are the top contributors to the UN regular budget 2005. As you can see, US, Japan, Germany, UK, France, Italy, Canada, Spain, China and Mexico. India is nowhere in this list. Clearly each of these criteria has its validity. Criteria were problematic. Now these are some questions which are put upon on these criteria. You can read them. These are very easy to understand. Let's come to the main point. And the main point is a related issue was to change the nature of membership altogether. The veto power of the 5 permanent members be abolished. This was another criteria. Veto to be in conflict with the concept of democracy and sovereign inequality in the UN, and thought that the veto was no longer right or relevant. In the Security Council, there are 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. The Charter gave the permanent members a privileged position to bring about stability in the world after Second World War. The main privileges of the 5 permanent members are permanency and the veto power. The non-permanent members serve for 2 years at a time and give way after their period to newly elected members. A country cannot be re-elected immediately after completing a term of 2 years. The non-permanent members are elected in a manner so that they represent all continents of the world. The non-permanent members do not have the veto power. Now, what is the veto power? The Security Council proceeds by voting. All members have one vote. However, the permanent members can vote in a negative manner, so that even if all the permanent members or non-permanent members vote for a particular decision, only permanent members' negative vote can stall the decision. This negative vote is called veto. Now you understand what veto is. Now, what is the jurisdiction of the UN? The question of membership is a serious one. September 2005, to celebrate the anniversary and review the situation, the leaders in the meeting decided that the following steps should be taken to make the UN more relevant in the changing context. Now, these were the steps that should be taken to make UN more relevant. You can read these steps. These are very easy to understand. Let's move forward to India and the UN reforms. Now, what India feels about the UN reforms and what reforms do India want in UN? India has supported the reconstructing of the UN on several grounds. It believes that the strengthened and revitalized UN is desirable in a changing world. India also supports an enhanced role for UN in promoting development. That means India is very cooperative with UN. India's major concern has been the composition of Security Council. UN General Assembly membership has expanded considerably. India considers that this has harmed the representative character of Security Council. Okay. Now, India argues that they should also have a role in shaping the decisions of Security Council which affect them. India supports an increase in the number of both permanent and non-permanent members. India itself also wishes to be a permanent member in a reconstruct UN. Now, these points which I have highlighted are very important to read. India is the second most populous country in the world, comprising more than 1/5 of world population. India is also world's largest democracy. India has participated in virtually all of the initiatives of UN. Its role in the UN peacekeeping efforts is a long and substantial one. Now, these are the points which make India a desirable member of UN Security Council. Despite India's wish to be a permanent veto-wielding member of the UN, some countries question its inclusion, such as neighboring Pakistan with India has troubled relations. Some countries, for instance, are concerned about India's nuclear weapon capabilities. So, these were the conflicts. Now are the UN and the unipolar world. Changes could help the UN cope better with the unipolar world in which the US was the most powerful country with any serious rivals. US power cannot be easily checked. Its military and economic power allow it to ignore the UN or any other international organization. As you can see in this cartoon, here is the depiction of US in a suit with tie, and UN is a small piece in his hand and war is on his another hand, which is a which is depicted in large size. Secondly, within the UN, the influence of the US is considerable. As the single largest contributor to UN, the US has unmatched financial power. UN is physically located within the US territory, gives Washington additional sources of influence. Nations in the US bureaucracy. Veto power. The US can stop any moves and finds annoying or damaging or its interests or interests of its friends and allies. Washington has a considerable degree of say in the choice of UN Secretary General of the UN. Virtually impossible to balance US power. So it is virtually impossible to balance the US power. UN is an imperfect body, but without it, the world would be worse off. This is the conclusion of the chapter. Till then, so here is the end of the chapter. Till then, see ya, bye bye.